I think there's a strong intellectual division going on in the world right now, because some people are holding on to old paradigms and old beliefs. And look, if we're measuring normal, we're going to get normal. I mean, for years, the idea that you couldn't grow new brain cells or couldn't change the brain in some way, that was a belief. And you know why? Because the scientist that was doing the experiment was studying rodents in an unchanging environment. How could there ever be any new connections or new circuitry or new brain cells if there's no new experiences? So I think in the age of information, in the age of technology, ignorance is a choice. And people are beginning to go, hey, I don't need my doctor to tell me about this. I can get on the internet and read it. Hey, I'm going to read a book on quantum physics and I'm going to ask the mysterious questions. I'm going to step outside of convention myself. So once you step outside of convention, you will be considered foolhardy or insane until you're able to produce some type of change. Then you're considered a saint, a holy man, a mystic, a genius. Dare to be original. So I think the camp is divided in a very big way. That's the reason why I'm doing all the measurements. Yeah. Because I want people to understand that the person that healed themselves of that condition, that traumatic brain injury, I want to show you that their brain is better. They're not just saying, I feel better. No, they are better. I want them to see that. Now, they didn't do that with a drug. They didn't do that with a therapy. They didn't do that with anything except by thought alone. And they made those biological changes. So, to answer the question, the camp is divided in many ways. The old paradigms, and then the new understandings and the new paradigms. And then there's this little kind of bridge in between, and we're only as good as the people that are willing to execute it. In other words, you got to be skilled at this, right? You got to be skilled at this. So if you're not skilled at it, we're not going to see any changes. So imagine 500 people or 450 people coming to an event, a workshop, and we are going to help them cross that river and to become conscious of their unconscious thoughts. You know, the ones that say, you can't, it's too hard, this will never happen, I can't change, I'm too this, I'm too old, I'm too that. Get beyond what their habits are, what they say unconsciously. Do they complain? Do they blame? Do they make excuses? Do they feel sorry for themselves? It's a program. They talk about others. Then look at their emotional states. Oh my God, I've been guilty for the last 30 years. I didn't even know I was guilty. It just felt like me. I've been unworthy. I didn't even know I was unworthy. It just felt like who I am. And all of a sudden, they start becoming conscious of that. And then they start creating a new change for themselves. And one by one, you start seeing these breakthroughs. You start measuring those breakthroughs. You get people on the stage talk about their breakthroughs, show their brain scan, show their heart rate monitor, show the energy change. And I guarantee you, just like an infection can create a disease in a community, I believe that wellness can be as infectious as disease. And you start seeing traumatic changes happening in a small community of people who are outside of the conditioning of their environment. The science has to be done to measure it, but the measurements are only as good as our students. And if they're not doing the work, if they're not developing the ability to sustain brainwave states, if they're not getting beyond their analytical mind, because what separates the conscious mind from the subconscious mind is the analytical mind. And if a person doesn't get beyond their analytical mind, they'll still think within their belief. So I fund all the research myself. I hire all the researchers and scientists. The neuroscience group, we have all those measurements taken. We have them reviewed by other peers. We have the HRV material run through an organization and then run through individual-wise, case by case, with certain physicians. We send the energetic measurements back to the university in Russia, so we're doing everything we can to say, are we doing this right, you know? Cool. But we are capturing anomalous things.
Awesome.
And those anomalous things are causing people to scratch their head. I mean, as an example, you'll see a strip chart on a brain scan and you'll see like, oh, that's beta, oh, that's alpha, oh, there's theta going on there, oh, a little gamma there. But when you're studying a brainwave, and all of a sudden if you took a a group of Crayola crayons and you went like that, and it just looked like a snowstorm where you couldn't see any measurements, how were you going to measure that? We had to go through this whole process of figuring out a way to measure the amount of energy in a person's brain, their entire brain, when that occurs. And so we've had to figure out ways through our understanding, because we're measuring the supernatural, to just go, wow, that's a lot of energy in a person's brain. Have you ever seen that before? No. That looks like it could be a seizure. Oh, really? Well, that person's wearing an HRV monitor. If they're having a seizure, their heart would be going crazy. But for 1 hour, their heart is in absolute love. That's anomalous. It only takes a few of those, and you start scratching your head and saying, well, God, we've been so conditioned. We're studying normal so much. We're studying depression. We're studying anxiety, cyclic mood problems, traumatic brain injuries. We're studying normals. And I'm not interested in normal. I'm not interested in natural. I'm interested in supernatural and supernormal. Sure. And that stuff means that if that person, once, twice, 3 times, we're seeing it over and over again. We're seeing a trend now. Well, if it's happening over and over again, then we know that something is possible for a human being. And when you see those energetic changes in the brain in a person who's had uterine fibroids or chronic pain or serious depression, and one meditation come out of that meditation and be healed, that's because the inner event was real. They were having a full-on sensory experience without their senses. And that's the transformation. We are in our second year of study. We have 4 events coming up this year, one here in the United States, one in Australia, one in Germany, and one in Mexico. And this is where we bring in our scientific team. So the amount of effort it takes in logistics to manage thousands of people has been a real challenge, especially since it's self-funded. I can tell you that there is a strong majority of people who are still taking the placebo, who are still making their changes. Because we know that, like in a Parkinson's study, you give Parkinson's patients a placebo and more than 50% of them, their intention tremors go away. But if you take those people after they're making 200 times the amount of dopamine by getting a saline injection or an injection of distilled water, they're making their own dopamine, and Parkinson's is a deficiency in dopamine. When they return back to their life, and they see their caregiver and they play chess with their friends and they see their wife or sleep in the same bed or whatever it is, their personal reality is creating their personality, reminding them of who they are. Their disease comes back because they're back to the same identity. So we know then,
coming out of drug rehab and going right back into their environment.
Exactly, and that's how strong the environment is. So our students who continue to do the work are still sustaining and producing more changes.
Wow. Now
that's the majority of our students because our students are committed. But we do have students that don't make it. Why? Because we're doing something that is unknown. We're doing something, not everybody is going to make that. Like not everybody's going to finish the mile. Not everybody's going to make the journey to the top of the mountain. You know, it's a journey. And so we ask people then, the ones that have had chronic diseases or conditions, the majority of them, by the way, are still doing exceptionally well. Some of them have had the disease return. And what we have them do is measure. Every 3 months or 6 months, you measure. Why? Because this is not about denial. This is about knowing. So the people who have had some conditions return, we ask them to measure, and then we ask them to go at it again. And if their values aren't changing, we ask them to intervene with other medical means or whatever they need to improve. So the ones that have had the healings, though, the majority of them are still doing exceptionally well. Some of them that stop taking the placebo or they lose their job, they lose their mother, they lose their life, and they get stressed, and they go back to their old self. Well, it's a matter of time when we're going to start seeing some of those conditions return.